Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you as I always do from my little, here it is, nutshell of infinite space right here in the Wood of the Holly. Today, I've got a return guest, someone who I've come to really like and count as a brother and a friend. And I have to say this, where I have lived in the safety of research and theory, this gentleman has lived in the danger of practice. He's been living the life, walking the walk, and yes, talking the talk. He's been arrested over 80 times, been jailed countless times. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by none other than Desmond Tutu. He was the director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and if you don't know about FOR, look it up. He's a prolific author. I recently read his book, Living Peace. I'm humbled and honored to have with me across the digital divide, speaking to me from the Beatitude Center on the gorgeous Central California coast. Welcome the one and only Father John Deere, with the important caveat that to me he feels like a brother. How are you, John?
I'm good, Bill. Thanks for having me on. You and the dinosaurs behind you.
Me and the dinosaurs.
Well, we're not dinosaurs yet ourselves.
No, the asteroid hasn't quite hit. And I'm really excited to have you on. And we had the opportunity to finally meet in person because our first conversations were sort of in the dark days of COVID at James Lawson's memorial, who was...
Did you know Jim?
I went to his nonviolent workshops for years.
Oh, so you've talked about him on this podcast and all?
I did with yes, I have with some other people.
You want to tell folks a little who he was?
James Lawson.
My best friends and teachers.
Yeah, so James Lawson is one of the most important avatars of nonviolence, really, of the 20th century. Famously, he, after his own journeys to India and having made a deep study of all things Gandhi, he returns to America really when he hears about those bus boycotts in the mid-50s with a mission. And that is, and I always viewed him as sort of a scientist to see if in a country drenched in violence, nonviolence could prevail. And his first sort of canvas or place where he conducts these experiments is Nashville, where he mentors a group of idealistic and faith-based students in Nashville, and they confront the iron wall of segregation at the lunch counters nonviolently. And he is successful in that endeavor, and then later leads as part of the Freedom Ride movement. The following year, he ultimately ends up in Memphis, where he is instrumental in the sanitation workers' strike, which tragically results in the death of Martin Luther King, who he indeed mentored about nonviolence. And then, as serendipity would have it, years later, he comes to Los Angeles, and he becomes the pastor at the Holman Methodist Church, continues his social work, but his canvas is Los Angeles. And I was fortunate enough to participate in the very same workshops, updated, I might add, that he conducted in Nashville in a church basement in the dawn of the decade that was the 1960s. He passed away last year, and I know you knew him and admired him. And so we happened to meet finally in real time, in real space, at his memorial last July.
I had met Jim Lawson in jail in 1990, as you do. You know, we were both arrested at a demonstration in LA. We shut down the federal building after the 6 Jesuit priests of El Salvador were assassinated, and we were calling for the end of U.S. military aid to El Salvador. These friends started then a weekly protest. Every Wednesday for 3 months, we shut the building down, and about 400 people were arrested. And Jim Lawson was one of the leaders of it, and I was a young Jesuit, knew the priests who had been killed in El Salvador. I was studying theology school up in Berkeley and came down every Wednesday to spend the day in jail, as you do, Bill. And that first day, we're going around the room, and in the room, because the men were in one big room, there were like 150 men. They were the priests and ministers, politicians, or celebrities, like Martin Sheen and Jackson Brown and Ed Asner. And I didn't know any of them were going to be there. And then Jim Lawson, who gave an amazing talk. He later hired me to be the director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. So he became my boss in the
Oh.
late 90s. He was the chair of the board. And then we, traveled the country and we talked on the phone every month until his death about nonviolence. And he was just a force of nature. Happily, there's some biographies being written about him, but it's good to talk about him. And LA needs to celebrate him because he did so much for unions in LA and for LA in general
Hmm.
and for immigrants, besides being the strategist of nonviolence for the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King said in 1958, he's the greatest teacher of nonviolence on the planet. I said last year at the wake, he still was. He was up until the very end. He was thinking like nobody else, like trying to apply Gandhi and Kingian nonviolence. We all have to take up where he left off.
Yeah, I was in his workshops, and I really felt that I was in the presence of somebody great. Like,
Yeah,
it
he
wasn't
was.
just,
No,
no, this guy was special. And, I'm a storyteller, and I was there because I was writing a script about these events in Nashville.
right,
I felt if I'm going to write this, I want to hear it. And when I realized, wait a minute, this guy's down the street.
right. Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
like, he's
He
the
was.
guy. He's the Lone Ranger. He's the one.
And
And
in that little group in that church back in Nashville in 1960, John Lewis, 15, 16, 17 years old, Diane Nash, Jim Bevel, Marion Barry, Bernard Lafayette, they all became the leaders of the civil rights movement. And Bernard, I just talked to recently, he's in his 90s, carrying away, doing
yeah,
what he
I met him recently, and I read his books, and he's quite a character. And I asked and begged him, and he said, "Yeah, I want to do your podcast." And then I reached out, sent him. I even sent him the script, and I don't know if he gets email.
No, he's not going to answer you.
Yeah,
But don't take it personally.
I don't. But you reminded me,
He's
and
hard to reach, and
Bevel
and
was the guy who
he
chewed the scenery. He was quite charismatic and brilliant.
yeah, yeah.
And we know Marion's story in John
But
Luke.
Diane Nash, the unsung hero, many
Right.
ways.
And she's the star in the script I wrote. It's
Yeah.
her and Bevel's romantic relationship. They're thrown together in this movement.
Wow.
And it's I call it a true love story because
Well, we better if I get going on all of that, we won't get to talk about
well,
anything.
it all dovetails back to why you reached out to me last week, and that is the passing of the Pope Francis.
Pope Francis. Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about him, because I'm not sure, and I've been saying this everywhere and writing everywhere, that people just understand all the great good he did. I mean, you can easily say he's a pope, he has to do good, blah, blah, blah. I think he was the most radical, most progressive, most prophetic,
Mhm.
most nonviolent, most peace activist oriented pope in history, and therefore, hands down, the greatest pope there ever was, and we got to live in his time. I concluded, having gone to the Vatican and worked with him and written for him on nonviolence, seeing what he did, and this is what I'd love to tell you about. He is on the same level as Gandhi and Dr. King, in my opinion. He's a
Mhm.
global game changer, one of the greatest people who ever lived. Could he have done more? Of course, we could all do more. It's odd to me, or weird, or providential, or mystical. You like the word serendipity that we have at this awful moment in history that we have to endure Trump and Pope Francis. And I don't know if this is crazy to say, but I always thought it was strange that Hitler was at the same time as Mahatma Gandhi, who to me was one of the greatest human beings who ever lived, ever. So I wanted to talk a little bit about him and just share some thoughts because I think we're in bad shape, Bill. Things are not looking good out there in the country, but in the whole world, and then ultimately with nuclear weapons and climate change. And this guy was a prophetic force speaking out every single day, and the whole world was listening except the United States, Bill. He was blacklisted, in my opinion, by and large, by the mainstream media. And so if you see the the mainstream press about his death, you'd never know he was against war or all the things he did. And you're going, well, look at his shoes, and yeah, and look at the kind of coffin he has, anything to water them all down. But that's he was a great, great person. And he died very mysteriously. I think in the way he gave his life, he was so sick, but he gave the blessing on Easter Sunday, and then he turned to the nurse and said, "Take me out for a spin." And that wiped him out. He was barely alive then, and he died. And my kind of message, my little sermon here, Bill, is we have to rise to the occasion. We've been blessed to all have such a great leader, and we don't get them that often, Bill. We don't have, I mean, we will never get another Martin Luther King, and we had this Francis, but we don't have anybody like him in the US, nor will we be allowed to. We have Trump, who's destroying us.
Mhm.
And we've got to all stand up and speak out and resist. And so that's why I thought I'll give you a call and let me vent.
Well, I appreciate it because, I'm a NJB, nice Jewish boy. And, historically, I look at popes,
Yeah, yeah, don't even go there, Billy. You're
with
gonna
the
get
outfits
my
and the
Twitch is coming.
and the
I
smoke
don't even
coming
know.
out, the new guy. It
Yeah.
seems like something from the Holy Roman Empire. But what I appreciated, and since you reached out to me, I kind of did a little bit of due diligence about the former Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Italy or his family's from Italy by way of Argentina,
Argentina.
the Jesuit, I
Yeah.
think the first pope from the Americas. And when you peel away the vestments and the
Yes.
bureaucracy and the curia
And the Holy Roman Empire.
and the Holy Roman Empire, there's this avatar, there's this messenger that indeed is powerful, but admittedly just kind of escaped my consciousness during his lifetime.
Well, so is that true, Bill? Because you again, I was following this, and I got invited to go over there at the beginning to help bring nonviolence back into the church and had these incredible experiences. And I couldn't get any media interested in what we were doing. And no one in the US, no one in the church, no one in the peace and justice movement knew about them. And I think that's to our loss. I'm a big person of interfaith nonviolence. I
Mhm.
think nonviolence is at the heart of all religions, including and especially Judaism, the Jewish vision of shalom, Isaiah's vision of beating swords into plowshares, Hinduism, you see it in Gandhi, Buddhism, oh my God, Thich
Right.
Nhat Hanh, and
Yeah.
Islam means peace, and submit your will to. And there are many thousands of Muslims I've met committed to nonviolence because of the Quran. I don't get that. And that's what they tell me, and they're living that life. But even Christianity is about that. And Francis was trying to change all that. And there's been this quiet, gentle revolution going on that has been really ignored in the United States, mainly because the US Catholic bishops, I don't know if there's like 300, are 95% all Trump Republicans. It just has nothing to do with Jesus. And God bless them, but they all got to resign and start following the nonviolent Jesus. Francis was saying all of that. When I look at his life, just for I want to talk about peacemaking and nonviolence because that's what
Right.
I'm passionate about. But from day one, he stands up there and goes, "Okay, I'm taking the name of Saint Francis." Well, that's like that that's a gutsy move. No one had ever done that. You don't try say, "I'm the heir of Francis of Assisi."
Okay.
You know
Even
what I
the
mean? It'd
cat.
be like taking Gandhi's name.
Yeah, I'm Gandhi. I'm renaming call me the Mahatma.
Well, really, and, I think he did it. He lived up to it. So from day one, he's saying everything is about the poor. We're supposed to be on the side of the poor. The church is poor, on the side of the poor. He said, from now on, the church is a field hospital for the suffering. No one ever said that. That goes against everything about the Holy Roman Empire or Christendom, which, by the way, all has to go. None of it has to do with the nonviolent Jesus. So just take my word for it, Bill. You were right all along. That's not of God. But
Well, I
the
want to
poor,
interject because we just had this Passover thing, and I'm always asked in my own family, Bill, could you lead the Passover? But my mom always goes, but no politics, because I've got a Trump stepfather. I've got a various one of those American families. What can I say? And but I inevitably get back to it because I said, well, what is this Passover story? I go, it sounds to me, and I didn't grow up, studying to be a rabbi or any of this, but this looks like the oldest liberation story in
Hello.
all literature. Like,
And it's
is there another one before this? I don't know.
no, and it began with women and nonviolence,
And it's a nonviolent thing. It's not,
right?
hey, the
Versus
Jews rose up and
Moses
killed
had
the
some.
Egyptians. It's not. This is it. It's right here. And so I always feel like I think we're kind of missing the meaning. And then my dad,
Yeah,
wait a minute, it's God because he parted the Red Sea. I go, yeah, that's the hocus pocus part of it. I mean, I don't get into a debate, but at its core, I thought, well, this is why are we repeating it 5,000 whatever years later? It is the nonviolent narrative in under these circumstances.
God is siding with the oppressed and liberating them. And it now means every country, every people on the planet. We were talking about Gandhi, and that meant from British oppression. We're talking about African Americans under segregation. That's why Dr. King is like a Moses figure.
Right.
Easy. And you could go around the world. My friend Desmond Tutu and Mandela, they were Moses figures, the Passover. And it's the ultimate politics, ending slavery and oppression and violence in the name of God so that every human being can be free. And it means, the US today is Pharaoh, and
Yeah.
we're the ones doing the oppressing. And also Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Gaza, wherever there's war going on, it's the killing of children that's the Passover story is about. And Jesus was claiming and saying, this is the story, y'all. I'm going to continue it through nonviolence.
Yeah. I got into big trouble in my own dinner
I
table.
bet you did. I bet
Wait a
you
minute. I
better
go,
not
we're
put it
the
on YouTube.
pharaohs now. We're the pharaohs. It's switched. We can't see that because, my mom was born in Berlin and she's,
Yes.
a baby refugee from Hitler and all this stuff.
And
So,
so you don't want to be carrying on the Nazi goal of killing anybody, not one child, not one person. That's the point of being Jewish and living the Shalom vision. It's the point of being Christian, and the kingdom of God is about nonviolence and all the religions. So Pope Francis, siding with the poor, he talked every single day about mercy and compassion. We're going to let each other off the hook, forgive each other. But what are the politics of mercy? That's the thing, Bill. This guy said that. Wait, so you can't have, there's no more executions and there's no more judging. And that led him to, can I say, am I allowed to say diversity, equality, and inclusivity?
yes, and I'm looking at these little. I took some bullet points from your brilliant article: commitment to the poor, commitment to Mother Earth, commitment to mercy, commitment to DEI, and I would just add because I feel that is a lousy name. I just
You
call
know
it
what? I said that just to make a point.
no, but I would like to say restorative justice.
Of
Like
course, that's good.
it's a little simpler and it makes more sense and it feels fair. Commitment to reformation within the church and peace and active nonviolence. So yes, I
That's
wanted.
wonderful. I'm writing that down. Yeah, and Mother Earth, I mean, there would be no Paris Accords had he not written this mammoth document, Laudate Si, which I think will go down as one of the great documents in history. It was a clarion call against fossil fuels and the destruction of the earth. But I don't know if you've read it, Bill. It's very hard. It's not easy reading. And you know what his main point is? Capitalism has got to go. Capitalism is the heart of the destruction of the creatures in Mother Earth. Who's saying that? No wonder
Nobody.
that. No wonder they hated this guy, especially in the U.S. But it was all, yeah, and the Reformation of the church we could talk about. And I wish he had done more, especially about women and the sex abuse scandal. But so, I was over there trying to get him to write a new encyclical. Figure why not? My friends and I.
Amazing.
And, only Laudato Si was on Mother Earth. He did Fratelli Tutti and these other beautiful, many books he wrote. But we wanted a major document on Jesus and nonviolence. And therefore, no Christian can ever again have anything to do with war, nuclear weapons, killing, or join in any military. because
Yeah.
that's what Jesus was like. It'd be like saying we're following Gandhi, but let's go nuke people in the name of Gandhi. It's total insanity, you know? So I learned over there this whole litany of public works for peace that he did that I wanted to share. So I wanted to say that, but do you want to ask me anything before I launch into that?
Well, like I'll just say this is like the lay guy, I'm the bridge, is when Jesus says turn the other cheek, I don't think it's metaphorical. I think he just like, yeah, he hits you here, you give him the other one and try and look into his eye.
No, it's not what that you just went like that. So what happened? So this is your problem for raising something like that.
Well, what I'm saying
No,
is it's
no,
not
no,
metaphorical, it's real.
no. It's not only real, it's realer than you realize.
Go ahead.
So I just did a whole podcast on this. It's called, well, it's like reforming the Torah. He said, you have heard it said, thou shalt not kill. I say, don't even get angry. Go and be reconciled with everyone who you've ever heard. You go and apologize to the people you hurt. But then the fifth and the sixth ones are, you have heard an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? But I say to you, here's it in the Greek, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. So he's saying, no more violence. You're not allowed to respond to violence with further violence. You have to, Gandhi said, then Gandhi read that statement every day for 45 years. He built his whole life on. You therefore have to figure out a creative, nonviolent way to respond to violence. The sixth is, you have heard it said, love your countrymen and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Then you will be sons and daughters of the God who lets the rain fall on the just and the unjust, and the sun rises on the good and the bad. So I talk of universal love and active nonviolence. But what's so cool, Bill, in that moment, if you go back and read the Sermon on the Mount, which Tolstoy said was the whole point, it's like Jesus is really like, I always think Jesus thinks he's Martin Luther King. Can I say that, Bill?
Yes.
Am I
You can say whatever you want. This
Jesus
is
thinks he's
free.
Gandhi. Jesus is doing a Kingian workshop on nonviolence in the outskirts of the horrible Roman Empire, way off in the boondocks in Palestine. He's going, okay, it's just like Jim Lawson in Nashville. I kid you not. He's going, okay, the bottom line, the rule, it's like a boundary. No violent resistance to one who's going to do violence to you. Okay, how are you going to do that? Okay, I'll give you 5 examples. The first one, that's the one you quote. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other and offer as well. Okay? Think about that, Bill. You just imitated that. If I was coming to strike you, where would my fists land?
Here.
What's that?
My cheek.
No, which cheek?
My left.
Why does the text going back 2,000 years say when someone strikes you on the right cheek? It's not possible to strike someone on the right cheek. Of course, you'd have to be left-handed. Well, there aren't any left-handed people. No, the thing is, in those days, the left hand was for unclean things. So
Right.
so he's not talking about a fist fight. So if I'm going to fight, strike you, my fist is going to land on your left cheek. So what's he talking about? He's talking about the Roman soldiers who are coming through, burning everybody's houses, stealing their stuff, raping the women, killing the children, and making the men carry the stuff. And they're now in the Roman army for the rest of their lives. And you're kneeling down, and it's exactly the Moses story: top-down oppression, the back of the hand.
Okay. I see.
So it's top-down humiliation. And Jesus says, when the oppressor does that, he's talking to oppressed people, turn the other cheek and assert that you're equal to him, and he can't strike you. He can't humiliate you. But it's risky and scary. It's symbolic, but actual. And then he goes on and gives other examples, which we don't have time for. Isn't that amazing, though? You see, it's an actual thing he was telling them, because the soldiers were coming through all the time and, treating them like slaves. And it was for slaves, too.
And it was so what you're saying is it wasn't necessarily an instruction to absorb a punch, but in
No,
effect
it's
a way to
resisting.
resist and avoid it.
No, it's you're going to get hit, but you're not running away. So the world says violence is going to happen to you. You got 2 options. You can strike back with violence or run away. Jesus came, like Gandhi and Dr. King, and said, there's a third alternative. You don't run away, you stand your ground, but you don't use your means with the opponent, and therefore you have to be creative. So you turn the other cheek and say, you can't humiliate me. I'm an equal human being with you. And you bring in that cognitive dissonance and disarm the soldier. Now, Gandhi came along, and as Dr. King said, Gandhi was the first person in history to take that sentence and apply it to nation states, which is what was intended. That all of India has to non-violently resist the British occupation. And if you do that, you turn the other cheek and say, we are not cooperating with your violence anymore, but we're not leaving. Eventually, the British will leave.
They will leave.
You
And of
see
course,
that? Isn't that brilliant?
right, and his laboratory was South Africa.
Yeah, yeah. I'm arguing that Francis was really learning this and trying in a new way. And I thought we were getting close to him writing a encyclical about this. And what would have been so great, technically, Bill, this is more information than you want to know, but it would have changed the church laws around the whole world. It literally could have been a nonviolent revolution. But so let me talk about just the peacemaking stuff and the nonviolence first, because I just get so darn excited about this. So to say the obvious, he was talking about peace morning, noon, and night and being ignored. And that's why I wanted to, I'm talking about that a lot everywhere. He was trying to listen to the global South and not so much the people of the United States and Europe. And so, he traveled all over the place, as you know. He went to about 49 countries, but places you wouldn't go to, like Iraq. He went to Iraq, and all over Africa. But from day one, and he wrote a book. You know what his last book was called, Bill? Against War. Did you know that?
No, no,
A whole book of speeches against war. And nobody in the US knows about that except for a small handful of us. And that's incredible to me. But around the world, he's known as this peacemaker. From day one, and we talked about this last time I was on, he was radically against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also against the US and NATO for egging Russia on to invade Ukraine. And so that when the day the war broke out, this is what I want to get into. Oh, there's a cat behind me.
yeah, it's okay. I've seen him before.
There,
I like
so
it.
yeah, it's a sad story. I
Yeah.
don't want to know.
Yeah.
Uh, Now I lost my thought because the cats
You're
were
talking about the first days of the
Oh,
Ukraine.
yeah, so, he's writing this and saying this, but Bill, he got in the car and he went to the Russian embassy and he broke all this holy protocol and pounded on the door and said, "You have to get out of Ukraine today." That's what I'm getting at. The same with Gaza, saying every day, Hamas, return all the hostages. This is horrific. And then Israel, you can't be bombing people, and now 51,000 dead. And he was calling them regularly. He went to Canada, but as a symbol of all the places he went to be with the indigenous people and apologized for everything. That never really had happened the way he did. He got rid of the doctrine of discovery, which was
Right,
about time. It goes back to 1493 that
right.
said any white Europeans can go in and take over the New World and kill any indigenous for Jesus, for the nonviolent Jesus. Total insanity. And it's been the law of the world. And that's gone. In the United Arab Emirates, he held a really historic meeting with all the Muslim leaders of the world calling for peace. In Greece, he goes to see the refugee camp. It wasn't on his tour. He goes there and he brings a whole bunch of them back on the plane with them to live with them. In the Central African Republic, where there's a war going on, and there are not many people there. No one followed his trip. He went right into the middle of the war, something I have done with bullets flying around. He was literally in grave danger trying to stop the war. In Hiroshima, which was just mythic, okay, so many people have been there, and obviously the church should be against nuclear weapons, but it wasn't. In the fine print, all the churches and moral theologians have this baloney thing called the doctrine of deterrence. We just got to have a couple of 10,000 nuclear weapons just to show that we're really committed to peace. It's total insanity. But in Hiroshima, he said the mere presence and existence and maintenance of nuclear weapons is immoral. There is no more deterrence. We have to abolish them. No Christian can build them, make them, maintain them, or threaten to use them. And he changed the laws. He did the same with the death penalty. And I didn't think I'd live to see this. And I've been full-time working against war and nuclear weapons forever. John Paul, you might think, who I think was a pretty right-wing guy, was very outspoken against nuclear weapons, but he didn't change anything. That's changed, and I get hope from that. But Bill, the last one I'll tell you, the South Sudan. So they're in this horrific civil war. He invites the president and his entire team and the rebel leaders to come into the Vatican, to live there, and to have a 2-day private retreat behind closed doors with just him in the room and the translator. 15 people. And then, did you know about this, Bill, before you read my article?
Did
He
not.
went around the room on the last morning. This was beyond St. Francis of Assisi. And he got down on his and begged them, stop the war today, end the killing. And then he kissed each of their feet. And he was an old guy in bad health. And it took like a half hour to go around the whole room. And it left everybody shaken. And millions of people have died in the wars in the middle of Africa. So there's still terrible things happening there, but it led to an explosion of a grassroots nonviolence movement as ACT. And I want people to know about that. That's what all of us should be trying to do. And we had a leader somewhere in the world doing that. We can't imagine a US president doing that. Uh,
Although Biden did, in the last day of his presidency, offer an apology to the native people on the Navajo
yes, and
reservation. Yeah,
he released 38, 39 people from federal death row, but not all of them.
no.
And he also released Leonard Peltier, and I was helping involved in Leonard's campaign. In December, Pope Francis called Biden and begged him to release Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist who'd been in prison for 49 years. And that's why Biden did it, because Francis intervened. Also, Julian Assange from WikiLeaks, I put this in my article. I had been visiting him over the years. And once when I was there visiting him, he tells me that the Pope had called the day before and talked for an hour and a half to encourage him, see how he was doing, because everyone was expecting Julian to be killed, and Julian and his family just went to the Pope's funeral. There were all this record of peace and justice activism by this guy. And I want to lift that up and say, okay, I think the poor guy tried. I really do. And I hope this might encourage your listeners and viewers to say, okay, what am I going to do with whatever I've got? How can I rise to the occasion and take risks and speak out and even take action? That's what I've been trying to do all my life. And I never would have dreamed I'd have a pope like that. But I saw him being ignored and actually hated. And if you're following what's going on now, the organizing against him to pull back everything good that he's done.
Well,
But it was hopeful, Bill. And I hope it gives you some hope too, that there
it
was.
does. And as you describe it, what's doubly unique, it's rare that somebody like this is actually at head of a massive
Rare.
institution.
Where has it ever happened before?
Usually they're, out there on
No,
the
no,
fringes.
this has never happened before, maybe in history. A president, a prime minister, a pope, that radical? It's like if Gandhi was like, I could tell you many other things. He came in and excommunicated the Italian mafia, and I thought he was going to be killed from then on. He fired everybody at the Vatican Bank. He found out people who were stealing from the funds for the poor, and he put them in the Vatican jail.
And I read
It's
where
just,
his last act was he dispossessed his own wealth, whatever, to prisoners
yeah,
right before he died.
just amazing. And he didn't really have anything. He had tremendous power, but he took that platform and put it at the service of the poor and the struggle for justice and disarmament and creation. So, and not just in word but in deed. And I think that's the spiritual life. Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, and Buddhist, that we're to engage humanity and try to stop the violence and do everything we can to work for a more nonviolent world. That's the second thing I wanted to say was we, got going over there and we started asking for an encyclical on nonviolence. It was a little over the top, Bill. It's never happened that people started lobbying a pope, but we got a hearing, and in 10 years, we saw all the things in the Curia changing, and everybody was now listening to us up until recently, with poor Francis being so sick. At the first conference, we issued a joint statement that people can look up, it's Google it through the uh, Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, or just look up Pope Francis's annual World Day of Peace message. This was 2017. But in the peace conference we issued a joint statement saying there's no such thing as just war theory anymore. After 1700 years, Christendom is over. Christians, Catholics are not part of war. We're told to love our enemies. We got Francis to write the January 1st, 2017 World Day of Peace message on nonviolence. Bill, it's the first statement on nonviolence in the history of the Catholic Church since Jesus gave us the Sermon on the Mount. It's the
Really?
first time it's ever been used, Gandhi and King's word, in a kind of saying this is what it means to be Catholic and Christian. And to me, that may be, if we all survive, the beginning of the paradigm shift. If hopefully the church is, Bill, I'm trying to get Christians to be nonviolent here, so wish me luck. This is what and you tell your mother that's what I'm trying to do. It's a
Well, I would
good,
just say
good thing
this.
I'm trying to do.
'Cause I would just interject here because I wrote scenes for about Lawson at the and one of the biggest scenes I wrote was this idea of responding in this nonviolent way isn't
Right.
just putting daisies in gun barrels. It actually, you got to rehearse it, you got to practice it. You're in a play, you got to learn the lines. It's not something that's just gifted to you naturally. He was of the mind, and I kind of agree that it takes preparation, no less preparation than, as he would say, a military operation. So they would
Absolutely.
rehearse and practice, put themselves in sort of these improvisational moments where they were being humiliated and practicing their reaction.
So
So,
that it would be totally nonviolent,
right,
instinctively nonviolent, but you have to
right,
train yourself to do that.
right. Because if somebody punches me, and I enjoy the training of boxing, my instincts are to boom back. I
I
mean,
think you
violence
need
is
to
in
make
us.
Jim Lawson's course again. No, I'm only kidding. So
What's that?
that's the whole point. And Dr. King would not allow anyone, well, Jim Lawson, to march for civil rights. You couldn't march with Dr. King unless you had been through a 3-hour practice session. And the Nashville and Greensboro citizens, sit-in movements are the kind of epitome of those trainings. Everything I've done and my work has been to do nonviolence training. That's what Jesus was doing in the gospel. That's what we have to be doing. Bill, I go farther than that. I think every religion is about nonviolence training. That the point of being in a synagogue or a temple or a mosque or a Christian church is to let go of your violence, let go of your ego, and surrender into universal love, universal compassion, universal peace for the Creator and all human beings, all 8 billion of us, and all the creatures and Mother Earth, so that we're wandering around in just infinite love, compassion, and peace. It's way beyond nonviolence. Nonviolence is just, I always joke, it's like a 12-step meeting. Hi, I'm John. I'm addicted to violence. This is a meeting of Violence Anonymous. We turn to our higher power. I'm making restitution, and I'm going to try to become sober person of nonviolence. We're all on that journey. Um, and Francis said that for the first time, and Catholics have no idea about it in the United States. Someplace in the world they do. And I just wanted to tell people about that. And I think he's thrown down a gauntlet to all of us, especially those of us who care about the earth and the poor and justice and discernment and the wars, to take another step and another risk and speak out bolder than we've ever done. I feel challenged by Francis. He was 88 years old. He didn't have to do all that stuff in his 80s. I want to retire, Bill, and sit on the beach. I can't. The world is, people are suffering and dying. And he didn't. He didn't. It was no joke with the stuff he did. Anyway, I get a little carried away, but it's probably just because I drink too much coffee, Bill.
Well, I appreciate your passion, and it's illuminating for me. I want to throw another name out there.
Uh-oh.
He was arguably the greatest boxer of all time. Was a practitioner of violence in the sporting world, and I'm talking about, of course, Muhammad Ali. And at the most critical moment in his young life, he chose nonviolence in the political world. At the same moment, he was champion of the world. I don't know. To me, that doesn't get enough cred in our current moment.
Not at all. I met him, and I was the Red Cross coordinator of chaplains after September 11th. We had this one place. If you lost a family member at September 11th, there was one place to go. This old, it's kind of a warehouse on 51st Street at the Hudson River. This massive structure. And we had 50,000 people we were dealing with all the time. And he came in one day and we toured him around and introduced people, and he was as sweet as can be. And later gave me a lifetime pass to his museum. And so I'm interested in him, but I always have, because he said, "No, I'm not going to Vietnam War. Why am I gonna? I'm gonna go over there and kill people of color when people of color here in the United States aren't free, can't vote, can't
Right.
get food at a lunch." But that applies today still and in everything. And I think he was an incredible showman too, is almost great poetry, but you're right to bring him up. And that's what I mean. Wherever we are, all of us can do something for peace and nonviolence and justice. That's a key thing. No one can do everything, but everybody can do something. And you know what Pope Francis said at the end of Laudate Si'? He said, just I'm expecting you to quote it, but no, I'm only kidding.
No, I want to hear it.
The greatest moral failure in the whole world right now is indifference. It's a shocking and wonderful thing he said, that we're indifferent to the fact that a billion people are barely surviving with clean water or adequate food, and that 5 billion are in subhuman poverty, and all these wars and nuclear weapons and catastrophic climate change, much less the growing fascism, authoritarianism, and the white supremacy happening in the US. So Francis, I went back, and after he died, I looked at the interview he did on 60 Minutes. By the way, right there, that was shocking. Pope's not supposed to be on 60 Minutes.
No.
But he's got a message for the world. And she says, "Well, I was very moved that you said the great moral failure in the world right now is indifference." And he goes, "Oh, yeah? You want me to talk turkey?" He goes, he's speaking to the people of the United States. "You're all like Pilate." You know who Pontius Pilate was, Bill?
Not
He's the guy,
Pilot, Pilate.
right? The Roman emperor's procurator of Jerusalem who ordered the execution of Jesus. He was
Right.
totally nonviolent. And he did it while I washed my hands of him. I did my part. What can I do? You got to kill the guy. And he said, Pope Francis said on 60 Minutes, in effect, all you Americans are pilots. You're seeing all this suffering every day on the news, and you're going, "Well, I just washed my hands of it. What can I do?" And he goes, "That's indifference. That's mortally sinful. That is the opposite of love. And we all have to end that. We have to wake up from this like sleepwalking culture, or where it's like a culture of zombies, and say no, not just to Trump and the whole insanity of the Republican Party and Fox News that's brainwashing us, and to corporate greed and white supremacy, but no to the forces in the world that are destroying the planet and the poor, as Francis did. No more wars, no more fossil fuels, no more corporate greed, no more nuclear weapons, no more violence. We all have to become people of nonviolence now. And with that, I will say merci, thank you.
Before we say goodbye, first of all, I want to say, if not for the apostles, and you know this better than mine, Jesus's lessons may not have been communicated to posterity. So what you're doing is communicating this message to posterity beyond the lifespan of the messenger. So it's important work. And along those lines, I want to make sure that firstly, people know about the Beatitude Center up there in beautiful the Central Coast, up by Morro Bay. And you have a podcast, and you're out there podding and communicating, and there's a way for people to find you and really dial into Father John Deere, and that's not a tractor company, folks. That's DEAR. And
Is potting a word? I don't know that that's a word.
it's becoming a word. I don't know. I'm just
You heard it here, folks, on
yeah.
Bill's show.
I'm trying to just do my best to stay irrelevant. What can I say?
Oh, well, you can get involved with me, then you'll be. No, I
Tell me
love
the
it.
name of your podcast again. Just that.
The podcast is the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast, and it's everywhere on Apple and Spotify,
Okay.
and the National Catholic Reporter, and my own project, beatitudecenter.org, where I have the podcast, which is free every week. And I've had Martin Sheen, Sister Joan Chittister, Richard Rohr, Bernard Lafayette was on, Bill McKibben, Martin Luther King III. I think Joan Baez is going to be on.
Oh, wow.
And others, wonderful people, all teachers of nonviolence. And I also do Zoom programs, longer programs on these questions of theology, spirituality, and the politics of justice, disarmament, and creation. And I have the world's leading thinkers and theologians talking about it. Isn't that great, Bill?
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else like it. Huh?
I'm privileged to have you here now. I really appreciate it.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Yeah. I'm here, I don't know, in my little nutshell. What can I say? Doing my best. And
it's the dinosaurs that are on behalf of your viewers. I just am a little concerned they're next to the baseball player.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, I've come to love dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And just the whole continuum of time and space. And now here's something I'll just let you go with. See, this is not a dinosaur. This is a Megacerops, and this is a mammal. Now, this guy lived in the Americas, and after the big extinction event 67 million years ago, it cleaned out the canvas and allowed for the massive biological explosion of mammals and a race towards evolution. And probably about 40 million years ago, this guy was roaming the savannas of the Americas, and we're more related to him than him. So I don't know. I love all this stuff. It's interesting to me.
Well, then I want to end with the vision of Isaiah, back to the Jewish vision of Shalom, because not only does he say someday the nations of the world will climb the mountain of God, listen to the God of peace, and the first thing they'll go down the mountain, they'll beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more. To me, that's the greatest oracle of history. Then in chapter 11, he goes, in effect, he says, we're moving toward the goal is every human being will become nonviolent. And once we do, the poor creatures are going to chill out too and all become vegetarians too. So the lion and the lamb will lay down and the child in the middle of them, and no more harm or death on all my holy mountain. That's a vision worth pursuing. That's what Jesus, Gandhi, Dorothy Day, Dr. King, and Pope Francis gave their lives for. And all I'm saying is, let's do the same. Let's wake up and talk about this. Talk about this. This is the thing worth talking about, this great vision. How do we get there? I think we're in the same boat as the abolitionists who were asking the impossible question, how do you abolish slavery? I laugh because everybody laughed. You can't get rid of slavery. There's always been. And they
go ahead.
Asking the question is the beginning of the end. In Britain, they did it without war. It was led by Quaker women.
Right.
And they gave a new vision of a world of human equality and said, that's where we're going. We need a new vision of a world of nonviolence without war or of poverty or in fossil fuels. That's where we're headed.
And you beg an important question. I talked about this with Manisha Sinha, who wrote a huge tome about abolition and another one about Reconstruction. is that could have slavery in the Americas, in a country drenched in violence, could it have been abolished nonviolently?
Yes, absolutely. But it might not have been because the white plantation folks were so committed to money, and they were all Christians, and therefore they were all blasphemers and heretics and idolaters because all they wanted was money. Well, to get the money, they enslaved people because it was all war is always about economics, and they were only going to maintain the plantation economics that Jim Lawson talked about by enslaving millions and millions of human beings. That's total evil. It was actually greed in the end that prevented them. But the people who led the movement, like William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, actually, in the early days, they used Matthew 5. They called it passive resistance then. Now we would call it nonviolent resistance. Said a Christian is supposed to be nonviolent, and therefore we cannot enslave human beings. And we have to give our lives to ending slavery and freeing them. And they gave their lives for that vision. Our job, I'm saying, Bill, is harder than theirs. We got to end war, nuclear weapons, fossil fuels, and the poverty that's killing 1 billion people. So we got to rise to the occasion. Everybody's got to get involved. And that's why I always say movements, movements, movements. Get involved in your local movement so you have one foot. You can't do it alone, but my cat is about to jump on me here, so I better get off.
And I just want to say, if you got a chance to read one thing, I think Frederick Douglass is arguably maybe the most important American of the 19th century.
Yes.
His journey is incredible. Read the David Blight book. But if you get a chance, read his July 4th speech in the 1850s, yes, because that's as important, if not more so, than the Gettysburg or, some of the second inaugural, some of these Lincoln speeches. What he wrote, to me, is he's just up there in the pantry.
Yeah, he's great. And, my friend, Father Ray, he's the pastor for 30 years for the small Black Catholic parish in Anacostia. Right around the corner, I'm from D.C. The greatest museum in Washington, D.C. is the Frederick Douglass Museum. Have you ever been there, Bill?
No, but I'd love to go.
You have not been there? It's the same house. And he died on the doorstep in his 90s. And the family kept everything exactly as it was till today. And then about 30 years ago, they fixed it up, and it's a great museum. In 1 week, when Trump came in with Elon Musk and started cutting everything, one of the first things that was closed was the Frederick Douglass House. Since Trump became in office, and I think that symbolizes what we're talking about, the return of white supremacy, which is really insanity, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer called it, when he was speaking of the Nazis, organized stupidity. So that's why I'm going to keep saying resist, resist, organize, get in movements, and that's living the spiritual life.
And quickly, I did a podcast with his great-great-great-grandson, who's head of the Frederick Douglass Initiative.
Really?
Yes. I'm blanking on his name because he's a sweetheart. He lives here in Southern California. And this is a mind blower. Not only is he a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass from the Y Plantation in Baltimore, the whole thing. He's also, the families merged at Tuskegee. He's a descendant of Booker T. Washington as well.
Yeah, that sounds...
It's amazing. I love all that stuff.
The journey.
Yeah. Wow. Folks, thanks for hanging in. There's a call to activism and humor and hope and positivity, and we're kind of trying to light the fire about the memory of this latest Pope and what his work was. Special thanks to Father John Deere. Check out the Beatitude Center. Check out the podcast. Tell me the name again.
The Nonviolent Jesus Podcast.
Nonviolent Jesus Podcast. I'll have the links available for everybody. Until next time, and this is my favorite word, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean namasaloha. See ya.